Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the Big League Philanthropist. I am here with Tony Everett, founder and chief playmaker of PureGame and founder of Personal Best Coaching. Tony, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
It is my pleasure, and thank you for having me on the show. It's awesome to be here.
Of course, of course. So let's start. Tell us a little bit about what is PureGame? What do you guys do? Give us a little bit of background, and then we'll kind of get into the journey here.
Yeah, for sure. So we found that kids today are struggling to make authentic connections, and it's really confusing for them. Today's world is a confusing place. And so PureGame provides mentors and a sports-based youth development program, character education, life skills program to help connect with kids. And then as that goes down, help kids connect with their peers, teachers, families, because we believe that everyone should live a meaningful life.
I love it. I love it. Is there an age group or a specific kind of, I guess, target, young person that you all work with, or is it just any young people in general are really, available for your programming?
Yeah, we partner with schools.
Okay.
And so most of our program will run from 6-year-old to 18-year-old. So anyone in that age range. We typically target the inner city type area, so those underserved areas, because they need it more than anyone, right? If kids are finding it hard to make meaningful connections, add to that limited resources, families that are working all hours, multiple jobs, and you've really got a kind of a recipe for disaster there, and they struggle.
Yeah. And I wanted to know, so we'll get into your background for here in a second, but I wanted to know why sports, why PureGame, why is the game such an important part of what you do?
So I struggled as a kid at school. I really disliked school. And one of the problems was I had a hard time sitting still. I had a hard time sitting in classrooms. And as I went through my older years, I've got a love of learning now, but I do it in motion. So I'm always out and about. I'm listening to podcasts or listening to books or doing something, but it's always in motion. And I just feel that when your body's in motion, and you're having fun and you're laughing, you learn more. Go figure. And so I think that it's a really important place for kids to run, to laugh, and they can learn more. But it's really the game, sports just brings people together. It connects us on a whole different level. And so our staff, we call them field champions, they're able to kind of just get eye to eye with these kids and connect on a different level.
Yeah, I think that's such a great theme that we've seen throughout all of the episodes we've done with this podcast, is that whether you are an athlete who has this just kind of sports connection, or you're an organization that uses sport, it's that unifier, right? It's that one thing that wherever you go, you can throw a ball or kick a ball or, shoot a ball, whatever it is, and everyone can get on board and get excited about it. So it is that great bringing together, a unifier that we've seen time and time again. So you mentioned being young and not really being into school, but you grew up in England. You were surrounded by soccer. But what kind of were the main skills and values that you learned with that development, right? You weren't a really big, school person, but soccer clearly was a big focus for you. So what did soccer teach you, and what were those values and skills, and how does it apply to what you're doing today?
That's a great question. And of course, it would have been called football back there.
Sure, of course.
But I think a lot of the football that I played back then was unorganized. It was just kids going to the park. So sometimes we had 6 of us and sometimes we had 36 of us. And we would just figure things out. And so a lot of the skills and values was that thinking on your feet, problem solving. If you had an issue with someone, you had to figure it out because you'd be playing with him for the next hour or two. And so you couldn't be holding grudges. But more importantly, I think as well, just the learning from other people. For me, especially, I would watch people play and it would always be, wow, how do you do that? I want to do that. And then it would drive me to want to do what he just did. And so I think just the life skills that it taught me was more importantly. Obviously, you've got the teamwork and, you know, all of that goes on with it. Following rules, right? It's an important part of life, knowing where your boundaries are. It's another thing that happens within sport that people don't really consider too much, but sport is played on a field, you know, with white lines and boundaries, and it's done so. So you play in a given area. Well, that's a life lesson right there. You know, I didn't realize until later on the fact that you play football and you've got a goal to score in. Well, the idea of a goal is it gives you direction and purpose when you're playing the game. And go figure that is the same in life, right? When you set a goal, it gives you direction and purpose. And so all of these things within the game, that's what really kind of got me into it, I think. And I loved making friendships. I made so many friends in the game. I have still got friends today from my childhood sporting days, and you know, they're friends for life.
I love it. I love it. And you mentioned the one thing that you mentioned around the boundaries. I don't think I've ever heard that brought up before either. It's something that isn't really talked about, but such an important, I guess, lesson to learn is that there are limits and there are boundaries and there's rules you have to follow. And just like sports, you know, that's life too. And so I wanted to also talk about, you know, you spent a long time in business development. You worked there. You also do some coaching with personal best coaching. So I just wanted to hear, kind of tell us a little bit about your career journey and when did PureGame become an idea? So take us through, okay, you're working in development, business development, then you decide I want to be a coach, I'm starting PureGame. Like, how did all these ideas come together? And what was that process like?
Yeah. So as any schoolboy, I dreamed of being a famous football player, but that didn't play out. And so I ended up joining the Royal Navy. Left there, and that little transition, I sat there and scratched my head and I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. But what I found I'm actually good at making connections and talking to people and putting people at ease. And so I literally fell into sales. And so I really liked it. I got good at it, and my sales career took me to different places and different selling different pieces of equipment and in different service areas. And that's eventually what brought me to the US. It was actually a sales job that opened up in the US that got me out here. So sales and development, business development has been a huge part of my life. When I came out here, came straight to Orange County, California. Of course, English accent. Someone said to me, "Oh, you're English. You must know everything there is to know about the game of football."
Sure.
And so I was like, "Sure, I guess so." And I started coaching, and yes, I love the game, but I hadn't been around kids or coaching, and I didn't know what to do or how to engage with them. So I started my soccer coaching career just simply because I was English, I think, and I love the game, and I really did love working with kids. But I soon found here in Orange County that the sport is overly expensive, crazy competitive, both on the field and the parents standing on the sideline. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah.
And so I sat there and was like, this isn't right. This isn't what I grew up with. This isn't the free place where I could just go and play and laugh with my friends and, you know, be Tony on the field. And I wanted to create something different. And so that was the initial idea of the program. I actually started to go to church out here as well, and ended up on a short-term mission trip in Nigeria, and started running this little kick around. Like you said in the intro, you can take this anywhere and kick the ball around. I mean, anywhere you go, there'll be kids kicking the ball around.
Yeah.
So I ended up kicking the ball around out there, and I was like, this is really unique. I can't speak a word of their language, and yet I'm communicating with them. And something just clicked in that moment, that there was something bigger and better than just club soccer, expensive, competitive form of play. And I came home with this idea of creating something that would engage kids in a fun, freestyle form of play, that allowed me to teach some of the lessons that I learned in life. And that was back in 2006 or 7, somewhere around about there. And so I started formulating and playing with the idea of what that would look like. and came across street soccer and thought that idea was a great idea, and then just carried on building it. So that's where it came from. It was a combination of all of these different factors coming in.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think I like that also. It was something that just kind of followed you throughout whatever you were doing, right? That attachment to being young and being able to just get out there and
Mhm.
play. And
Yeah,
yeah, there are rules, but it's not, coaches yelling and parents yelling and pressure and all these things. It's just fun
mhm.
at the end of the day. And I think that's something we've really lost in this country with youth sports a lot, because it's so commercialized now. It's competitive, and there aren't a lot of opportunities for kids to just go out there and play.
Right.
And it's also not, I don't know about many neighborhoods, but there's just not a lot of like intermingling of like grabbing neighbors and walking down the street to the park to play anymore. It's just,
Oh,
the world is different. And I think that, when I was a kid, yeah, we were always outside playing and doing things. Is just normal. You grab your neighbors and be like, hey, we're going to the park, whatever it is. But yeah, it's so different today. It's so isolated. And so I think what you're doing is incredible. And so I want to talk about like what programs you guys actually do. So tell me a little bit about, you start PureGame. How did it start and how did you develop it? And
sure.
then what are you guys doing today? So I know it's been a journey for sure that's still going, but tell us a little bit about, how you got it started from that idea in 2006, 2007. How did
Yeah.
you start making it happen? How did you like officially plant the flag and then grow from there?
Right. That's a story, let me tell you. So I remember, so I was a club coach, and I had this idea that we should make it, fun for kids, make it a freestyle play. So I actually asked a couple of the parents of the kids I was coaching at the time if I could meet for coffee and run them through the idea. And so I kind of came up with the idea that we would play this with at the club level, and these families would pay to be a part of it, and the fee from that would then sponsor kids in the underserved areas, those areas that didn't
Mhm.
have a lot of resource. And the first comment came out of one of these parents' mouth blew me away. He said, well, that's great, but that's not going to help get my kid into college, right? So I sat there, was like, oh, that's strange. And he really did want his kid to get a scholarship through soccer. And so it was all about skills drills, improving as a player and all that good stuff. So of course that blew my mind. And I was like, well, that's not a good idea. I guess I'll scrap that one. And then as the story has gone through this, I ended up in Santa Ana with an organization called KidWorks, and they were doing a spring break camp, and they had a soccer portion of this. It turned out that the soccer coach was running late, so a friend of mine was there, and he said, have you got your soccer gear in the car? I was like, yeah, I've got it all in the car. And he was like, can we get you to set up a program for these kids? So I went onto the field and I set up a PureGame program. I set up the small-sided fields, and I just got kids playing. I think we had 60 kids or something, and they were all playing. Yeah, it was great. They were all playing all of the time. And then the soccer coach turned up, and he was like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm playing street soccer PureGame style, and this is what we're doing. And so that was it. And then he said, great, carry on. We split the boys and girls up. He had the boys and did some skills and drills. I had the girls. They were all playing. We switched them over. I had the boys. They were all playing. His skills and drills session with the girls fell apart, and they were all sitting around picking daisies and didn't want to do anything. So day 2 came around. I was there again. He said, can you set up your fields again? And I set them up again. Day 3 came around. I turned up. He'd already set up the fields for me. So it was, he just bought into it.
Yeah.
And then the executive director of KidWorks was there and saw what I was doing and said, can you work with my kids? And that was the planting of the flag for PureGame.
Okay.
That was when it officially became an organization working with kids, because from there I was able to work with kids from KidWorks. It was official. We got a board together. We created some curriculum to start teaching them some life lessons and stuff, some character education, and that was the moment that it all started.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that it really did start so organically. And that you also clearly had a lot of different ideas that you tested in some ways, had conversations, brought it up, and kind of saw how feasible it was. Um, it definitely somehow does not surprise me that the parents had that reaction to your first first idea. I unfortunately have been there, not myself,
Yeah,
but heard those
yeah.
conversations as well. But yeah, it's fantastic because it really proves that like really the root of sport is supposed to be fun, and
Mhm.
that's what kids want. They want to have fun.
Yeah.
And if you think about some of the best athletes you've probably seen in the world, 9 times out of 10, the majority of them got into their sport by just having fun and playing it with their friends, or,
Right.
doing it at school. Like, it was just a fun activity for them. And so I want to ask you too, now that you've seen this grow and develop and you're continuing to work with kids, what kind of characteristics do you think kids need to be, who people working with kids, right? Those role models, what kind of characteristics do they need to have? How do you instill this sense of fun while still teaching them the sport and what
Mhm.
goes into it?
Another great question. Really, they do need to be fun-loving, playful characters. They need to have that playful heart. And people who are able to be in touch with their inner child make the best mentors for kids, because kids can see the child within their mentor, right? And so um, I think that they're the main characters. Yes, they need to have their own set of boundaries, so kids
Sure.
get to know how far they can be pushed. Because believe me, launching PureGame, we then got into schools, and I'd be running programs, and about week 3 or 4, these kids would become little demons out there. They'd be running around pushing all of these buttons, and I was like, what is going on? And over the course of the years, we understand now that there is a pushing of limits right around week 3-ish when you're working with kids. And so as a mentor, you've got to be able to know when to kind of stick your heels in the ground and say, nope, that's too far, and we're not tolerating that behavior. So you've got to be able to have that serious side, but do it in a way that's not harmful. Do it in a way that's not demeaning to kids. You don't need to
Mhm.
shout and scream at kids. No one needs to shout and scream at kids. If you just actually got on one knee, got eye to eye with them and talk to them, they learn so much quicker and so much easier. And if you're able to reinforce the good behavior that you see, sorry. So if you're able to reinforce that, kids want attention, and so will continue doing that behavior because they're getting the type of attention.
Mm.
But the opposite side of that coin is also true. Kids want behavior. So, sorry, kids want attention. And so if you're giving them attention that's negative, they will
Mhm.
continue the behavior that's getting that attention because they crave attention.
Right.
And so mentors need to know that.
Yeah, it's almost like that example of like everyone shouts out in a class and you wait for someone to raise their hand and you call on that person. And then everyone realizes, oh, if I want to be and answer the question or get involved, I have to raise my hand. You
Right.
don't just say, ugh, don't call it out, raise your hand. Like you just wait till someone raises their hand and
Yeah.
then you call on them, then everyone gets the cue, like, oh, that's what I need to do to get attention. So and that was what it reminds me of is in school, you have the teacher that just waits until somebody puts their hands
Yeah.
up and just sits there and waits. And then she's like,
Yeah.
oh, Danielle, you have the
Yeah.
answer. Great. Like,
Yes. Yes.
10 people have shouted it out already, but you raise your hand, they're like, okay, you can do it. So
Yes.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a great example. But I think you touched on this a little bit and we talked about why sports, but you at PureGame have 3 different types of champions that you call out within your young people. You have wisdom, you have encouragement, and you have charitable. So I want to know why these 3 words, why these 3 champions, and then what other concepts did you consider, or how did you kind of figure out that these were the things you wanted to highlight with these young people you work with?
Right. So one of the things that we found, we treat kids, as if they have all the answers because we have all the answers, right? And that it's the curse of knowledge. Well, I know it, so how come you don't?
Mm.
Well, they're that much younger than you. That's why they don't know it, right? And they haven't gone through the same experiences as you have. So as an older person, right, I have got the wisdom that I can share with young people to be able to say, I don't know, some kind of wisdom, right? Just be yourself. It seems easy, but me being able to share that with a kid actually helps them understand what being their self really means. And they don't necessarily know that, but I do. And so I would then be the wisdom champion to help them. And then the encouragement piece, when you look at kids, they need, in today's world especially, there's so much negativity that surrounds us, and they need so much encouragement to see beyond their current perceived limitations and their current surroundings, that if you can step in there and say something encouraging like, yes, I know, I've been there, I know what that's like, I can help you through it, or I did this to help you to get them through it. You can encourage kids to be and do a whole lot more. If you watch a soccer game, I will guarantee with kids, if you've got encouraging parents who are saying positive things on the sideline, you will have a team of players who will work hard. If you've got parents who are screaming and shouting on the sideline, you've got a team of kids who will just give up. Because it's that encouragement. So we need to create more encouragement champions. They need to be more positive. And watch kids play. If someone misses a goal, they'll shout at them and they'll, what are you doing? Well, they just missed a goal. They don't need to be reminded that they just missed a goal by you shouting at them. They know what they did. So if you can teach kids to say, hey, good job, unlucky, let's try again next time, it picks their head up. And so now that encouragement champion comes out, right? And so that's it. And then the charitable champion is really for our supporters. We want supporters to know that they are being a champion by helping kids. And so if you donate to PureGame, you get the mantle of becoming a charitable champion. Because we all want to be champions, right? Everyone in the world wants to be a champion. So it's easy. Donate $10 and you can become a charitable champion. And so that's why we got it for, and make it nice and simple for people to follow and understand.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I love incorporating your supporters as well as the young people in the program. And I think, you mentioned you're in Orange County. And so I'm assuming, is this a program that's specifically for young people in Orange County? Have you expanded out into other parts of the greater Los Angeles area? Where are you doing a lot of your work, and where do you see this being able to grow, given the fact, like you said earlier, that soccer or football is such a global sport? This kind of ties in on a global level. Where do you see down the road, even 10 years from now? Do you see this being in different places around the country, or even in different spots around the world?
Yeah. So before the pandemic, that was the idea, was we were going to grow a national company, and we were actually growing at a good rate. We were up to 80 some odd schools before the pandemic. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and we went from that many to zero, and pivoted about a dozen times through the pandemic to stay relevant. But then coming out, what we've realized is we took that time to build and create content and games and ways to engage kids that really do help them find pathways to success of their own choosing. That's what we're about. And so I still see this program as an international program. It can go anywhere. But if the pandemic taught me anything, if we had have gone international as a company, we would have been dead in the water because of the pandemic, because the size of the company would have been too big to support. So we still want to grow, but we're going to grow it through licensing. We're going to we want to be able to say, we'll train someone in Nigeria, Rwanda, China, Europe, wherever. We'll be able to train them in the program and then provide them with the support via video content that we can. So it would be much more of a licensing fee that we can grow this, and then we can grow it slowly across the US. It would be very easy to train teachers or anyone else in the PureGame system on how to engage kids. So yes, we want to grow, but it will be through licensing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that the stepping away, or kind of pivoting a bunch of times and really being creative and thinking about how things go from here. I think a lot of people had a chance to do that in the last couple of years, for better or for worse. But I think it sounds like you guys were able to really navigate this time to stay relevant, as stressful as it probably was, but really thinking about, okay, this is a good snapshot to, what happens if XYZ, right? You can kind of
Hmm.
pull these scenarios. And I think the licensing idea makes so much sense because then you're almost building the skills of the people that you are working with in these other places, right? If a coach in, let's just say Portugal really wants to adopt this model, now you're training him or her as
Yeah.
well as the kids in this great, kind of life skills. And same thing if
Yeah.
you take it to, Australia or Rwanda
Yeah.
or wherever, right? You're kind of giving people this learning as well as the young people that they will then go and work with. So I
Right.
love that because you could easily reach so many more people, and you don't have to necessarily be the person facilitating all of that. I think
Right.
that's a really great idea. And if you can train the trainer almost, it's almost like you
That's
can
exactly it.
train more
That's
people.
exactly it. We want to do that. Yeah. And
Mhm.
and we this is the beautiful thing about this. We take kids out of juvenile hall and hire them, right? We give them work. Um, and we could see that if it's a licensed program, then we can replicate that across the world, right? We can
Mhm.
give jobs to the people who don't feel that they're employable.
Yeah.
And as long as they've got a heart for kids and they've got that playful mindset and can connect with their inner child, they can work with kids in this program. It would be very easy.
Yeah, no, I wanted to bring up the work that you do with young people in juvenile hall here. And then you also have mentioned a couple of times helping these young people choose the paths of their choosing, right? Find success of their choosing. And so I want to hear, obviously these things all tie together, but tell me a little bit about why working with young people who have put themselves or get been in situations where they've, ended up in juvenile hall. Why is that important to you? Why do you focus on bringing that group of young people out? And
Mhm.
then how do you help them find success of their choosing, whether it's these young people from juvenile detention or juvenile hall, or if it's just young people at a school in somewhere in Orange County?
Right.
Why is that so important? And how do you get them to figure out what that success of their own choosing is?
Um, so a lot of it comes down to my own childhood. I said that I wasn't great at school, didn't like school, and I look at some of these kids and they fit that same model, right? They just don't like sitting down for 50 minutes in a classroom learning, and and many of the kids in juvenile hall, through no fault of their own, really are in there. They've been abandoned in some way. They've been mistreated by the adults in their life, and they find themselves in juvenile hall, and it's almost like they've been thrown on the trash heap of life, and they're
Mm,
being left there forgotten. And that's just not right. these
mhm.
kids these kids have talents, as do the kids in any school. They have talents, but the school system wants to funnel them down into a program where the hierarchy of math, English, and science rule the day. And so if you're not good at any one of those three, then you're kind of pushed to one side.
Yeah.
um, and and college is an awesome place, but it's not for everyone. And
Yeah.
well, what about trade school? That could be something that people look at. So the juvenile system program, I've been in there now a number of years, and I've met so many talented individuals who I look at and I'm like, why are you here? You're brilliant.
Mhm.
And again, it could be an issue at home, whatever's gone on. They've made a mistake, and I see an opportunity for them to get plugged in somewhere else. And so I'm like, if I see that, then I should be the one kind of highlighting that for the kid, and maybe even providing that opportunity for these kids. We've just set up. I had 6 kids working in a tango unit of juvenile justice at Juvenile Hall, and they all want to become entrepreneurs. And so I sat there and said, okay, if we're going to start a business, what do you want to do? And so we went through this whole program, and we are going to start a business that's going to sell high-end apparel, t-shirts, with designs that have been created by the kids in juvenile hall, and we'll sell them. And the money that will come from that will go back into the juvenile justice system, which currently sits at a 70% recidivism rate. That means 7 out of 10
Wow.
kids are going back inside. And it's costing $250,000 a year to put these kids in detention. So how about we take that money and invest in the kids, help them learn the life skills that they need to start marketing, graphic design, art, go figure, whatever it is, doing content like this, right? Teach them how to do this and then put them into life, because it's great that we've got this system that detains kids, right? It was there for a reason, but it's not teaching them anything to come back out when they're back into their environment that put them in there in the first place to handle this environment any different. So let's equip them with the tools they need to do things differently. Let's change behavior. And you can't change behavior by locking people up.
Yeah. Oh, so great. And such great, just really perspective that I think from a lot of people's, they probably don't know, first of all, that 70% recidivism exists in the juvenile system in this country. And that's, when you're talking about kids, that's really tough number to kind of grapple with, that you think, of course, they don't want to be there. Of course, that this isn't like, something that they're excited to be doing, but yet they end back up there. And I think that you're right. If we're not instilling values and skills and opportunities for these young people to feel like they have something else to be excited about and get themselves kind of jazzed up on, during the week, if school's not their thing, what else is it? And I want to go back to your earlier point about college not being for everyone. And I think that is so true. And we really do have this kind of system, like you said, that kind of funnels people up. And then if you don't fit the system, you kind of get kicked this way or kicked that way. And you have to figure out, okay, now what do I do? I didn't follow the path, quote unquote. And so I just think that's such a great perspective to share, because I think a lot of people just think, well, of course you go to college. What else do you do? But there are other options, and there's other skills you can use to be amazingly contributive and valuable to society. It doesn't just have to be your knowledge, your book knowledge,
And what happens is, with the pressure that kids are under to live a life anyway, add the pressure that I'm supposed to go to college. Suddenly you've got this pressure cooker situation that's going on where kids go, well, I'm not going to make it, so why even bother? And then suddenly they get to the why bother, and now they're checked out completely. So just remove the pressure and show other options, right? Let them find their pathway to success, and it could be through trade school. I mean, like I said, we hire these kids, and so they come and work for us as coaches. So we're actually teaching them how to become a coach. Brilliant. Go be a coach, work with kids.
Yep. 100%. I love that. And I think the big takeaway for me is that the pressure we're putting on young people to do something or to follow the path can actually be more harmful than helpful, because kids need that time to play and explore and find out what they like. It's that same thing you talked about with the parent who says, I want my kid to get a scholarship to college. Well, what if the kid doesn't want to play soccer in college? Have we talked to the kid to see if that's even what he or she wants to do? And so I think it goes back to our early conversation about even just youth sports in general. Like, there's so much pressure to make a scholarship, make a team, keep going. And it should just be them figuring out, do they even like it? Do they even want to keep playing it? Is it something they enjoy? And I think the work you guys are doing is so important to show people that it's okay if there isn't this like huge competitive, like pressure cooker environment. They can learn to love a sport and love how to play a game just by playing it and having fun with each other. I think it's so important. And it's a metaphor for life, just like you're working with these young people in the juvenile system, right? If you take the pressure off of being a success by society's standards, then they can be like, oh, I didn't know I could start my own business. I didn't know I could go to trade school. I didn't know I could coach a team. Like, you just give them those options. So it makes a lot of sense letting them choose that pathway to success versus telling them where to go and saying, this is what you have to do. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And that kid didn't end up playing at college either, by the way.
There you go. So I want to wrap up with just a couple questions. We talked about kind of next steps with PureGame and your kind of future goals and visions of licensing here. But I want to know, what does being a philanthropist mean to you? We ask all of our guests this and we get a different answer every time. So I'm curious to say, What does that word mean to you? And how do you define it?
And that is a great question, and I believe that many people will say, well, a philanthropist is giving money, but I think it's giving of yourself. I think it's whatever it is you have, give of that. And when you give of that, then you're a philanthropist. So if that means turning up and high-fiving some kids because you're a really good encourager, then you are a philanthropist.
I love it. I love it because it's simple, and it's very also individualistic. So it could look very different for every single person, but every single person has it in them to be a philanthropist. Right. And it's not just about one thing. So I love that definition. And so my last question, and then I want to learn more about where we find PureGame, where we find you, and where people can support. But, we've had a lot of athletes on the show who are philanthropically minded. They want to make a difference. And we also have folks that listen to the show, and they want to be able to help their communities. And so I wonder if you have any advice for whether it's an athlete looking at using their platform to do some good, or any individual who just wants to stand up for things that matter to them or make a difference in their own communities. Where can they start to kind of figure out how do they help? Where do they go? How can they drive change? What advice would you give someone who might be asking those questions?
Yeah, and that's such an important question, actually, because the world of nonprofits is growing. There's more and more people wanting to start a nonprofit because they think that's the way to do good. But my advice when anyone says to me, how do I start a nonprofit? I always say, don't. Go find an organization that's doing what you would essentially do, and help them. Right? As nonprofits, we struggle to get everything done. There are skill sets that we need that we've never been equipped with, but someone out there is a graphic designer, right? This is a great example. Graphic designers are needed everywhere. Well, PureGame needs graphic designers, especially now with this t-shirt company. And so you could be a graphic designer out there wanting to help kids. Well, come and work for PureGame or volunteer for PureGame and help kids by showing them how to become a graphic designer. You're not having to set up another organization. You're not having to put yourself out there. Go and find the organization that's doing what you want to do, and help them with your skills. For the athlete out there, they have got such a massive platform to engage people with, that I would like to see the athlete talk more about the needs of youth. An athlete knows the struggles to get to the platform that they are on, and they had to struggle to get there. There is no athlete that's just walked in and gone, yeah, I'm great. They've had to struggle. They've had to work hard. So they've had to understand and learn the skills needed to overcome obstacles, to carry on going, and to do everything that they needed to do. Well, there are kids following you. So how can you help those kids understand that battle and understand that fight? If it's not in athletics, it could be in life in general. Help talk to these kids and say, you've got this and you can go far. I think that's important.
Yeah, almost being that encouragement champion for them, right?
Right. Yeah, they need it. Kids, and today, especially, I'll say this again, especially, kids need more encouragement than we've ever needed before in our history, because they are bombarded with so much negativity.
Yeah, that's so great. And it reminds me too of what you're talking about around, giving of yourself. And then at the same time, right, if athletes can talk about the joy they found in their sport, and the fact that it's so much harder now to make it to the pros because of burnout and sports specialization and just lack of funds, lack of opportunity. I've seen many athletes start to say, hey, like, why does it cost $5,000 to play in a travel soccer league or travel basketball league? Why is it so expensive? I want to help my community in, I don't know, Louisiana or in Maryland or in California, get access to these for $50. Why does it have to be so expensive? I think you're 100% right. Like athletes really don't have to give the money, but just to talk about the experience is
Right.
a huge thing. You know, if a Tom Brady can say, yeah, I didn't play football till I was a senior in high school or junior in high school, people can go, and look where he is, you know, like we
Yeah,
don't
no.
need these kids to be, we don't need these kids to be, you know, the Tom Brady or LeBron James or Lionel Messi of 8th grade soccer, right? Like they could
Right.
just have fun and develop their skills. So I appreciate that. And I think a lot of athletes could do a lot just by speaking out on the youth sports space now and how we can fix it, because it is certainly needs a lot
Yep.
of change. So and Tony, most important question for you is, where can people find PureGame? How can they support and connect with you and the work you guys are doing?
Yes. So thepurgame.org is our website. Go there and you can find out how to support. There's a myriad of ways you can become a charitable champion right on the site. But you could become a wisdom champion. Share your wisdom. And the question is simple: if you could travel back in time and speak to your 10, 11, 12-year-old self, what would you say? Right? What would you tell yourself? And we share that with the kids, by the way. And so they get wisdom from all sorts of backgrounds. Same thing with encouragement. You could become an encouragement champion. You can actually write your younger self an encouraging letter, and we'll go deliver it to a kid in the Pure Game program. It's another way you can get involved. If you do want to come out and become a high five champion, that's a new one that we're creating. You can come out and support the kids by just being on the field and high-fiving them. And that way you can kind of experience what we do. The usual social media channels, you know, all of that good stuff, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We're all over that.
Awesome. I love that. I did not realize you guys had high five champions do it. If
It's a
anyone's in
new
Orange
one.
County, go do it. I'm jealous I'm not. Anytime I am, I'm going to be calling you, Tony, to
Right.
be a high five champion. That would be so
Yes.
fun. But we'll put all this in our show notes. I hope everybody goes out and writes a letter to their younger selves for a young person, or shares some wisdom. And we'll hopefully get some charitable champions for you here too, Tony.
That would be awesome.
But thank you so much for taking so much time to chat with us about your work. Thank you for all you do. And we really appreciate your time here with us.
Thank you. It's been wonderful being on the show. I love the well thought through questions. They've been awesome. Got me thinking.
Awesome. So glad to hear that. I'm going to share that with Carter. He's going to love it. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tony. And thanks to everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Big League Philanthropist.